Hello, everyone. I'm the director for our New Zealand registered not-for-profit educational charitable trust called Common Knowledge. And we hold all of the birthing better skills that I and hundreds of fathers and mothers developed in the early 70s. We also hold a concept that these fathers and mothers developed in the early 70s, which was when you're pregnant, it's normal and natural to self-learn birth skills and then use those birth skills to work through the activity of birthing our babies. No matter where the birth occurs or what happens, we get pregnant to have a baby. We want to have a positive birth. No woman wants to suffer. If a father or other is at the birth with a woman, they don't want us to suffer. Obstetricians don't want women to suffer in birth. Labor and delivery nurses, hospital midwives, home birth midwives, doulas, childbirth educators, our mothers and fathers, everybody. Nobody wants us to suffer in childbirth. So why are so many women suffering in childbirth? And why are so many women afraid that they will suffer in childbirth? Because I've been involved in the childbirth conversation for 50 years, within my lifetime, I can certainly tell you why so many women are suffering. Because when I gave birth in 1970 in the United States, the first ever childbirth preparation classes taught, Lamaze and the Bradley method, were entirely skills-based. There was a very, very high societal expectation that all expectant parents attend these first classes, which were 6 classes, 3 hours each, and then we went home and we practiced those skills, and then we used them. There was a hiccup in that, which was even apparent back then. Lamaze and Bradley in New Zealand, Grantley Dick Reed, they focused on low-risk women. So those of us who had medical high risks, some of us didn't learn the skills. Or if our birth became more high risk, we stopped using the skills. Instead of focusing on 100% of pregnant women will give birth and 100% of pregnant women will birth better when they're skilled, because when we use skills, we suffer less. That didn't happen. And that's a sad day for us, because here we are so many years later with women still suffering in childbirth, because the skills primarily were focused on low-risk women for 3 goals: a natural birth, pain-free labor, without medical interventions. And so then you get into this complexity. What's the word natural birth mean? Is it natural that women suffer? Is it natural that there are risks? Is it natural that risks become problems? Is it natural that risks that become problems may become a tragedy? Yes, but that word natural was taken over to imply good and easy, right? And that's not accurate. So people get confused. Even when we use the word natural birth or normal birth or physiological birth, that's pounded now. We want women to have physiological birth. Is bleeding in labor physiological? Yeah. Is suffering physiological? Is the natural occurring pain and contractions suffering? Is a baby getting stuck a physiological issue? Yes. So we have so much confusion in the conversation that it makes it very hard for individual women to approach their birth. All pregnant women have a concern about potential risks, particularly if they have identifiable risks or identifiable risks to their babies. But the largest percentage of women have infinitely more anxiety about the suffering in childbirth, because labor is hard work, and because if you labor and have a vaginal birth, labor pains, we have no control over them. We can't say, okay, I want to have another contraction in 30 seconds, and it's going to just be a little bit painful. We can't do that. We don't have any control over that. So we get swept along when we labor and have a vaginal birth by the baby's efforts to open our body up, come down through and out. And so women have anxieties, they have fears. And we're told as women, don't be afraid of birth. Women have always birthed. But women have always been anxious about birth. And they're anxious about birth as one, as they don't want to suffer. And also anxiety when used correctly, is actually a gift to help you to become more observant. And when you're observant in your pregnancy and observant in your birth, then you will use those observation skills with your newborn, because your newborn can't talk to you. So when women have used the gift of fear, the gift of anxiety, to become observant and distinguish between the need for immediate action or the need for observation or the recognition that there's nothing really happening of concern, when they grow that gift of fear within themselves, then they are more settled as parents of newborns, instead of every time the baby squeaks or moves going, "What's the matter?" Right? Probably nothing's the matter. So when we talk about suffering in childbirth, this is what's plagued women throughout time, is women suffer in childbirth. And it is not related to a problem. It is related to the fact that throughout time, every culture, all of us as women, have had to face the reality of childbirth. Global truth throughout time, forever, ever, ever, will be and will always be. There is no way to know what your birth's going to be like. This is always going to be true. And when we're faced with such a big unknown, for such an infrequent experience that's so life transforming, then we feel often paralyzed, particularly when it is coupled with a follow-on sentence which is inaccurate, which is, therefore, there's nothing you can really do to prepare for your birth. And that is inaccurate. Lamaze, Bradley, and Grantley Dick Reed were really the first inclination that we could prepare for the birth, meaning we could prepare by learning skills, the skills to use when we did the activity of birthing our baby and did the hard work of labor. Because back then, when I gave birth in 1970, 95% of us labored. Whether we had risks or not, those were considered to be natural and normal and physiological. And whether a risk became a problem, those were considered to be natural, normal, and physiological. And if they became a tragedy, which is very infrequent compared to the number of risks and the greatly reduced number of problems and the infinitely reduced number of tragedies, they're still natural, physiological, and normal. So when we're faced with that potential, because there's no way to know what your birth's going to be like, and we're told there's nothing you can do to prepare for it, we really feel paralyzed. There is something you can do for it, and that is, when you're pregnant, that it's normal and natural to learn some birth and birth coaching skills and then use them to work through the activity of birthing your baby. Now the cesarean rate in a lot of countries is close to 50% or more. You're still doing the activity. You get in a car, you're prepped, you lie on a table. It's an activity. It takes place over time. So for us at Birthing Better, just keep using your skills. That's within the concept. Would we like you to use Birthing Better skills? Sure, but it doesn't matter. There are lots of skills-based methods. But the difference between skills-based methods and information methods is that skills, you learn things that you will do when you're doing the activity. Whereas information is just information that may just go out of your head. I mean, really, if you get told you haven't dilated past 5 centimeters, what's that do for you? We haven't dilated past 5 centimeters. Whoops, another contraction's coming. Oops, you didn't learn any skills. Oops, you feel like you're out of control. Oops, you've just suffered. Oops, and there we are. You're still 5 centimeters. So if you're given information and you can't apply information to skills, this is why we have a problem in the childbirth conversation now, and why it's so important that all of you listening to this grab hold of this concept. Easy to say to people when you're pregnant. It's just normal and natural to self-learn birth and birth coaching skills and use those skills to work through your baby's birth journey. Use them on the way to the hospital while being prepped and in surgery. Use them when you go into labor. Use them when you're having Braxton Hicks contractions and false labor. Use them. Use your skills. This is an activity you're doing. People say, well, childbirth's unique. No, it's not. Yes, no, yes. Why is it not unique? It's an activity, right? You could be climbing Mount Everest, that's how big the activity is. You could be doing an Olympic event, that's how big the activity is. But a big activity should have more skills attached to it, right? But we can't practice birth. So if you were climbing Mount Everest or doing an Olympic activity, you would have practiced. But when you learn skills, like my husband and I learned skills in 1970 taking a Lamaze class, we practice those skills for half an hour a day for 6 weeks so that they'd become part of us, so that when birth began to unfold, we would begin to use the skills. And why didn't those skills evolve? Why didn't Lamaze, Bradley, and Grantley, Dick Reed, Childbirth Without Fear really become dominant? Because these 3 obstetricians were focused on low-risk women to achieve a natural birth, pain-free labor, which most women don't achieve without medical intervention or medical care, which most women don't want. They want medical care because it's such an infrequent big activity, and they don't want risks to become problems and then become tragedies. There are lots of people who are going to listen to this and who are going to say, well, I want a natural birth, or I want a home birth, or I'm going to have a midwife, or I'm going to birth in water. Great. Will skills make a difference in your birth? Individually, we don't know. You might have a birth that isn't particularly painful. You might have a birth that's very quick and contractions come so intensely that you feel like you're going to die. We don't know. There's no way to know what your birth's going to be like. However, it's going to unfold. And if you want to have a home birth in water with a midwife, wouldn't you like to feel in control? We can't control the fact that you don't have any hot water that night, or there's a hole in the pool, or that your midwife is sick, or there's a snowstorm and she can't get to you, right? Or you happen to be alone and nobody is with you. We can't control that. We can't control whether your contractions pile on one another, or whether or not you just labor for hours and hours and hours nonstop with no progression. We can't control that. We can't control how we feel about the pain. We can control our responses in every situation because it's an activity, just like any other activity. So when we are doing any other activity in life in which we have skills, what we are doing is implementing our skills to do that activity, and we're refining them, adjusting them, and they're sustainable, and we do our best. So when people talk to me about skills-based methods and this concept that when you're pregnant, everybody should become skilled and use the skills in the birth, we have a lot of detractors who go, well, it has to be perfect. Their skills have to achieve this or that. No, they don't. Right? No, they don't. You just do the best you possibly can. And if you can reduce your suffering by 0.0000000000001%, you've reduced your suffering by that amount. And if you can reduce your suffering by 10%, 20%, 50%, 60, 70, 80%, great, great, you did it. Nobody can do it for you. So what do we want you to take away from this? Because there's got to be a takeaway. There are skills-based methods out there besides birthing better. There's hypnobirthing, hypnobabies, calm birth, birthing within, boot camp, calm birth, whatever. Okay? Just remember, this is your baby's birth. You got pregnant to have a baby. And you have to do the activity. And you will always do that activity better, meaning you will suffer less when you use skills. How often should you use skills? Every moment of the time. So what's another analogy we could come up with? Let's create a non-physiological analogy. Driving a car. So society has a very high expectation that everyone who drives a vehicle learn the same set of complicated skills and apply them. Every single second you're behind the wheel of a car, it's an activity. It may be an activity in distance as well as time, but it's an activity. And society expects you to apply, adjust, and adapt those skills. The steering, the braking, the headlights, the looking in the mirror, the turning on the signals, stopping at stoplights, paying attention to the cars behind you and around you, and what's going on the road. And every single second. It's not physiological, but it's very, very much like birth. It's a confined period of time in which moment to moment to moment, you need to apply skills all the time. That's how you engage in the activity of birthing your baby and how you prevent yourself from suffering. In a car, that's how you may very well prevent you having an accident, even if someone else is going to cause it, because you are paying attention to micromanaging the skills you're using, and birth is the same way. For those of us who are highly skilled birthing our babies, we can tell you it is a moment-to-moment decision. How am I going to breathe in? How am I going to breathe out? Can I soften in my pelvis? Am I in a position that's providing my baby a good way to come down through and out? Yes, we pay attention to that. We use our human cortical mind to work with our body's responses to the circumstances we find ourselves in. And we do not suffer. We don't necessarily like it. We can hate it. We can think it was just bloody hard work, and we didn't suffer. So if we want to take a physiological thing, we can take hunger, we can take sex. Right? When you're horny, we can all bonk. It's no-brainer, easy to do. But you have to learn skills and apply the skills if you're going to be a good lover. If you're hungry, we can just assume that our kids know what to put in their mouth. But if you have kids, you know damn well it's not true. You spend years taking stuff out of kids' mouths. So instinctively, we don't know what's safe to put in our mouth. As adults, how many of us have eaten spoiled food without knowing it? Come on. And how many of us instinctively cook? I mean, come on. If we can't instinctively know what's safe to put in our mouth, and we can't instinctively cook, and we can't instinctively be a good lover, then why do we assume as women we instinctively know how to birth just because we get pregnant and have to do it? And that's where, in my lifetime, the childbirth conversation got crazy. Right? Just because we get pregnant and we birth, because 100% of us who are pregnant are going to give birth one way or another, we do not know how to do it. It's as simple as that. We will get through it one way or another. We will get through it fine or not fine. We will have risks that aren't a problem, or we will have risks that are a problem, or we will have risks that are a problem and then become tragedies, or we will find that we had orgasmic births, or we suffered terribly and feel traumatized. Our body either recovers quickly or it doesn't. All this complexity. And where do skills come into it? We birth better when we are skilled. We birth extra better when we have prepared our body to open up for our babies. And birthing better gives you those skills that some other skills-based methods don't, because the fathers and mothers who developed birthing better in the 70s knew that when we had long first stages or second stages, we got tired, we got discouraged, we suffered more, and we were more likely to need more medical care. Nobody wants a woman to suffer for hours and hours and days. When there was no medical care, that's what all women had to deal with. There was no way to stop it. And if we lack skills, we just suffer. So what is it that you're going to say to yourself when you stop listening to this? If you're pregnant, I'm going to learn some skills, and I'm going to tell my birth provider what skills I'm learning from 24 weeks on and ask them to put them in my notes so that anybody can see. I learned breathing, I learned relaxation, I learned about positions. I prepared my body, I created more space in my sacrum and my pelvis. I did the internal work, and I know my vagina will open up if I'm laboring. My partner and I learned communication skills. Just have them put it in. They don't have to know what they are, nor do they have to know that you're using them. However, what you want to say to them is, if I look like I'm coping well and my partner and I are working well together, damn it, praise us. We want feedback, right? Tell them that. Tell them, praise us. Good on you. Because the secret you don't know is that they work with very few skilled women now. Because after the Lamaze and Bradley and the skills-based method of the 1970s, the next childbirth trend got put in place in the 80s. And it dismissed skills entirely into the cats and cows aren't taught to birth. Women don't need to. They just need to be left alone by the medical profession. That the medical profession is the cause of all evil. And that has started all the nutsness. Really, it just has been accelerated globally. Now you make a birth plan. You tell your birth professionals what you want. How many birth plans really unfold the way you want? Very, very few of them. Because there's no way to know what your birth's going to be like. And you have to do the activity. And so if you're saying no to medical care and you're not doing the activity well, and your providers just see you suffering, they don't want you to suffer. So they're going to come in with the tools that they have to try to prevent the suffering. So when Birthing Better families started to develop the skills, we focused better on better coping skills and working together better than Lamaze and Bradley, because those were the beginning skills. They just needed to evolve. That's natural. And then we started to work on the body skills, because we realized as it became safer to have cesareans and easier, and women were more risk averse to having risks through labor and a vaginal birth and choosing more interventions, that we could prepare our body, which might reduce or prevent those risks from harming ourselves or harming our baby. So we became highly skilled. We didn't want to suffer trauma. We didn't want trauma to linger in our body. And we didn't want to suffer because we felt so out of control in our birth. So you're going to tell everybody, learn skills when you're pregnant. And if when you learn them as a pregnant woman and you have your care provider notate them, also say to them, if we look a little bit out of control, then go back to our notes and encourage us to use the skills. Because it's still this goal of mine that this one type of birth is the best. So when women plan that one type of birth and then don't achieve that one type of birth, or they're not working toward it because circumstances change, they stop being engaged. They become passive. We never should be or have to be passive in the activity of birthing our baby. Now, often people say to me, I don't have time. I'm pregnant. I got 10 kids at home. I work, blah, da-da, don't have time. And you go, when your baby's born, are you going to have time? Well, of course. So this is what Birthing Better families asked me to tell you. When we are pregnant, our baby's here with us. Now, it's not after the birth. We are pregnant with our baby. There's no difference between now and after the birth. Our baby is with us now, which means we have to invest some time being skilled, because babies expect that of their parents. If you aren't skilled once your baby's born, you know how hard that is. So many of us suffered from postpartum problems because we didn't have skills to cope with a newborn, or we didn't have help. So if we have skills that we develop in pregnancy and use in birth, many of those skills carry over to what we can do when our baby's out of our body. But our baby's here with us now. So don't use the excuse you don't have time. You have to have time. You have to, as a parent, be skilled to raise your kids to be adults. That's what you're doing. You use skills because you're teaching them the skills that they're going to need to use. We're not raising children, we're raising the future adults. So the more skills you bring to your parenting that feel good and that you work and you cope with, right, the better. Because in reality, you don't have to like birth. We don't like a lot of parenting, right? We don't like a lot of partnering. We don't like a lot of work. But when we have skills, we apply those skills even when we hate the circumstances or the situation. So we don't want to have suffering in childbirth anymore, and we can easily grow this concept. It takes people like you to share this video. Donate to our trust. Share it on Facebook. Pass it on from Facebook or from YouTube. Do what you can to help grow a skilled birthing population so it just becomes normal and natural that we all self-learn birth and birth coaching skills. Birth professionals would love working with 8 out of 10 skilled families. They just would love it. And if you have complicated risks, when you are coping and managing better, your birth professionals negotiate better with you than if you look like you're suffering. So there's no downside to being skilled in birth. None. Absolutely none. Being skilled is not going to tell midwives or obstetricians we don't need your care. That's nonsense. Being skilled is what we do. We want them to bring their skills to safeguard the health and well-being of our baby to us, whether at home, in a birth center, in the hospital, right? We still have to do the activity. Us, women, me. I had to do that. You, pregnant woman, you have to do it. Nobody can do it for you. You can't take a break for lunch. You have to do it. So you should be highly motivated to become skilled if this is an infrequent and one-off life-transforming activity that you're going to do. Highly motivated. And anybody around you should highly motivate you to become skilled and to remind you you're a parent now. Becoming skilled to birth this baby is your job as a parent. That is what you do. Not to just choose what you'd like at a birth. That isn't parenting your child. That is focusing on you. But you're a parent, and you need to focus on your relationship to your child. And if you birth with skills, you will move out of birth ready to parent your child after birth. If you don't have skills and you suffer in birth, this has a huge negative impact on how we parent our newborn because we cannot let go of the suffering that rapidly. And sometimes we don't for months and years. So please help our not-for-profit Common Knowledge Trust change this childbirth concept. Please help us. It's for the benefit of all our humanity that we grow a skilled birthing population. Thank you for listening. See you again.